So after episode 10 dropped, I had a lot of people say that they thought Eve had a big death flag on her head. And I thought to myself, usually I'm pretty good at spotting that, but I kind of walked out of episode 10 not really thinking that much. But once thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that does kind of make sense. And if you walk out of this episode 11, and you say, oh, she dead for sure, I wouldn't necessarily even try to convince you otherwise, because it ain't looking good. And I could be totally wrong, and we could walk into episode 12 and she gonna get skewered. But am I the only one who feels like she's completely safe? And I'm not just trying to say that to just be like, oh, I'm trying to take the opposite approach that everyone else is taking, but it's like, this could be a case of just maybe the anime not directing it as worrisome as maybe the source material needed to be. Because when she initially got jumped at the end there, I was like, oh, she's actually, yeah, they are committing. But because they let the scene play on longer and she didn't get stabbed, it didn't go ominous, I'm actually thinking she gets out of that situation alive and is gonna be completely A-okay. I'm willing to be completely wrong and have a pie thrown on my face next week. The episode really wants you to think she's not gonna make it, and because of that, it makes me think she's totally gonna make it. You know, I have those full live reactions over on Patreon if you want to see my full good thoughts to any of these Failure Frame episodes over there exclusively. So, before people, because I know the internet, I know how people are, I could literally be like, hey, this is why I like something. I really like the color blue. And then people are gonna be like, see, it has the color green now, you hate it. The internet is a wild place. My biggest issue with the 3D has always been on the human models randomly being 3D in a 2D scene, and nothing about the scene requires it to be that. This episode has probably the worst 3D in terms of volume and everything we've seen. And I don't think it's great for the most part. In fact, I think it's, in a lot of ways, god-awful. But I can accept why this episode had a lot of 3D. You rewind to the mid-portion of the show, and characters are in a goddamn in-bedroom, and every other scene the characters are 3D for no apparent frickin' reason. I have issues for that because it's randomly distracting. When I see hundreds, if not thousands, of character models, and this isn't just like they're going up against skeletons. This was destined to have a struggle production forever. I'm going to make a comparison. If anyone read the Attack on Titan manga, when we got into the final season content, the maneuver gear in that show became a lot more complex. It was a much more complex character design. And Isayama, the mangaka of Attack on Titan, felt very bad when it got to the anime because he knew how much more pressure he put on animators and art directors because of how complex that is. That is just basic armor for characters to wear. Failure Frame's author made the most grotesque, complex monsters known to man, and there was no freaking way you were ever going to get a primarily 2D and even a well-animated, well-polished 3D. Because I would actually say the animation for the 3D is good, it's smooth, it doesn't feel choppy, but it doesn't blend in. The horse that our man rides on is a freak abomination that there was no way to make that look cool in anime. I'm sorry. I know some people did mess with it last week. I personally don't. Some of the designs I think work in 3D really well. The bird-like creatures, a lot of the stuff from the first episode. There's this one thing that pops up in this episode. It has like this giant red mat. Is this thing going to a BDSM club? I don't know, but the thing just does not work. It was destined to have weird-ass visuals for certain scenes. It 100% is. So I can look at the 3D and say it's well animated, because it moves the way it should, but it's very poorly blended in. If this was a cave or a dimmer scene, it probably would be a little more serviceable. And I can say all that, and it doesn't take away from my compliments that Failure Frame is 110% more on track than it ever was in the first 2/3 of its run. Because they're not randomly switching the characters to 3D in the middle of conversations. Seeing Toka in 3D riding on a 3D horse going through a goddamn army of 3D monstrosities, I completely understand. So I can say, I don't like how it looks, and I, in a perfect world, wish it could be the biggest Sakuga scene we could ever see, because it could be the coolest thing. And instead, we got a serviceable scene that you're just like, okay, you know, let's wrap this up so we can get back on track. It doesn't take away or make me think that I was wrong for complimenting the new direction. Because even before this episode, I've had some people act like, oh, see, there's 3D, you're wrong. And it's like, do people not hear what I'm saying? Do you not understand that every third scene going into 3D for no apparent reason is the issue, not having a primarily 3D scene that you accept is 3D because of all the craziness happens, you know what I mean? The fight was cool though, because I didn't know how they were getting out of this alive. I figured, like most, that they were going to run into the cave and, you know, maybe try to block it off or something. Instead, we used the newfound pet, the horse, and basically lead them away, and kind of doing some loop-de-loops, because our boy has like 60,000 mana, so he does have a pretty good mana pool. The unfortunate thing is he only gets the experience of all the shit he kills if he doubles back and grabs it, so he cuts it close. I think he quite literally dropped to 0 at the very end and then started leveling up. Just kind of cool stuff if you ask me. We also get a decent amount on the other side's perspective. The funniest thing is our boy is at such a different level than literally every other summoned hero. And man, you know, as much as Toka feels like he was done dirty by the goddess, I kind of hope at some point he sees what everyone else has been up to and the toxicity he avoided because some bitch threw him into a gutter. Because unironically, the goddess tossing his bitch ass away made for a much better life if you think of it. I know he really wants to skewer a fool, but when you think of it from the viewer's perspective, Toka being abandoned and pushed through the sewers and hell quite literally at the beginning has actually set him up for a much more peaceful life than everyone else is dealing with, because that dude, I think it's the same dude from the first episode who was the first to really turn on Toka. He goes on like a 2-minute rant and she's just as toxic as hell, man. I'm surprised more people ain't be backstabbing. Now, we do end the episode with Eve. I understand why they jumped Eve, because she did look like she was going to attack. I think she gets out of it. I think it's too obvious that they want us to feel like she's dead. I just don't know, because she can't talk right now. It doesn't look like she's frozen, but I could be mistaken. Toka doesn't seem like to be anywhere close to her, so she has to do it herself. Hopefully she pulls through, because I do think she's a cool character, and I think she has a lot of potential. And honestly, the fact that the episode started off with Toka, what would normally be the edgy MC, yes, go sacrifice yourself, do this, like, the way Toka would be in a lot of authors' hands is the way that dude who gave the 2-minute montage spewing about how, you know, screw the weak. Like, that's how the MC would normally be in a show like Failure Frame, and instead he's like, no, you ain't sacrificing yourself. Here's the actual plan. I like him as an MC, I ain't gonna lie. The show definitely didn't become like a 9 or 10 out of 10 anime, but you'd be foolish to make me want to say I would watch a season 2 if they produced one. Let me know what you're thinking of this week's episode of Failure Frame. Definitely some very obvious 3D, but hell, I was watching Beast Wars the other month, and if I can watch Beast Wars and still get enjoyment, you know I can watch Failure Frame and get some enjoyment when it's in 3D. Thoughts down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course, ring that bell, and like I mentioned, full live reactions over on Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout-out. Alright, so today we got GR Valis, Rockano 9, Pav, Morty, Jodhoss, Intar Students, Darktus, and we also have JJ, so I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care, and you all have a good one.